2016 is considered a magical year in hip-hop amongst fans. A large part of people's affinity towards 2016 is due to the amount of perceived high-quality projects that were released from high-profile artists during the year. However, this seems to be a bit of a red herring. I personally think that people's attachment to 2016 is misguided, and that the year is overhyped. There is one essential reason why 2016 was not as good of a year as you might think it is. Now, if you don't know what kind of music was coming out in 2016, let me give you a brief refresher. Every major artist that you would want music from made music in 2016. We're talking J. Cole, Beyoncé, Kanye, Kendrick Lamar, among a bunch of other big names. You had projects like Coloring Book, which won a Grammy and arguably was Chance the Rapper's last good project, and you have Frank Ocean and Rihanna, who haven't released music projects since then. There's also the likes of The Weeknd's Starboy that still gets spin on streaming charts to this day. The 2016 XXL Freshman List is considered arguably one of the greatest XXL covers of all time, with artists like Lil Uzi, 21 Savage, Denzel Curry, and Anderson .Paak to name a few, who have all maintained successful careers in the industry at such a high volume, unlike previous and future lists. So on paper, this year seems like it's one of the greatest ever. Looking at the sheer number of popular artists that had released an album in 2016 indicates that it was a good year for music, but in my view, looking back on things can always make them seem better than they actually were, and you miss a lot of the underlying details when you're trying to reflect on something. I mean, for the most part, people feel nostalgia when the past feels better than the current existence that we're dealing with now. I mean, it's 2024 now and people still talk about 2016. Is it just nostalgia, or was it actually that great of a year? As we move forward in time from 2016, we start to notice a shift in the hip-hop landscape. The popularity of mainstream artists who were on top of the world at the time seemed to plateau. But what caused this to happen? Well, before we get to that, you need to understand that 2016 was a year in which hip-hop changed significantly, and no one seems to really have noticed. I mean, it's a little more obvious if you look at the projects that were released pre and post 2016. I mean, Drake went from, if you're reading this, It's Too Late in 2015 to releasing Views in 2016. And I'm not commenting on the quality of these albums, but stylistically, they're completely different. As I mentioned before, Chance the Rapper went from Coloring Book to The Big Day, aka I Love My Wife, the album. Need I say more? And I think the biggest culprit of this, kind of says the most, is Rae Sremmurd. In 2015, they released Shrem Life 1, which I think is an album that is full of songs I really enjoy. And then they released Shrem Life 2 in 2016, where I think the only song that I can recognize off of it would be Black Beatles. And then there's Shrem Life 3. I don't really even remember it coming out, and I definitely didn't know that Shrem Life 4 had come out already. What I'm trying to say is that 2016 was a year in which you were eased into a decrease in substantive quality for the sake of commercialization. That has led us to the situation you see in music now, where substantive and impactful music gets next to no attention, and so music just comes and goes without any real staying power. I think the music that released in 2016 was good, but if you were to do a quality versus quantity assessment with years like 2015, 2014, or 2013, sure, 2016 might win in terms of having a large quantity of good albums coming out that year from major artists, but if you were to compare the number of great projects or game changers that came out, I feel like the numbers are fairly comparable, if not the years prior beating out 2016, showing a dynamic shift in substance. Like with Kendrick, for example, his last major album during that time was To Pimp a Butterfly in 2015, an undisputed classic album amongst fans. But then he shifted to make Damn in 2017, which is by no means a bad album, but definitely was not comparable substance or production-wise to Pimp a Butterfly. Yet over a shorter period of time, Damn was streamed exponentially more, showing that not only fans, but artists were shifting their music habits. I mean, 2016 was a year in which Designer was an XXL freshman. And no hate to him, but I can barely understand a single word that he's saying on Panda or Timmy Turner. And you could take a guess on how many streams Panda has on Spotify now. I mean, it's over 1 billion streams. And the fact that music like this became passable and also a viable method for artists to grow their careers, it opened the doors for someone like Lil Pump to become the biggest artist of 2017, alongside the emergence and massive fall-offs of other similar mumble rappers. This has created a culture amongst fans and artists alike of a fast food mentality when it comes to music. It doesn't matter about the quality or substance, it just matters if it sells. I was on Twitter and I saw a discussion about how Jack Harlow has a #1 record with Loving on Me, and that people were disappointed that he reverted back to a more pop style of rap, unlike his most recent album Jackman that was more ground level and introspective. But looking at it from Jack's perspective, that one song has more streams than that entire album combined. If you wanted him to stick with a certain style, you should have shown equal levels of support, or more support for the type of music that you actually wanted. I mean, it seems crazy to me that people online always cry out about wanting real music, but most of the time when they get it, they can't be bothered to actually support what they supposedly want. I mean, J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar released new substantive projects in 2021 and 2022 after people were crying out for them to release music for years prior. I'll let you tell me how well supported those albums are now. They are talked about almost as if they don't even exist. Whereas with Drake, he gets clowned on social media for making music that isn't at a certain standard, yet his albums consistently put up good numbers that are exponentially higher than his competitors. When I made this comment, I was told, oh, well, it's not bizarre that Drake would stream better. It's always been the case that non-substantive music sells better. But what is that based on? I would say that prior to 2016, a song that was catchy might be the difference between getting 500 million streams and 1 billion streams, but now it's at a level where the difference is 50 million streams and 300 million streams, which basically represents having a promising mainstream hip-hop career and not. The biggest problem of all is that we are doing it to ourselves. If you think an artist doesn't make albums that are at a quality that you would prefer, then they shouldn't be your most listened to artist on your Spotify Wrapped. If you don't like something or think something could be better, be consistent. Why would an artist change their music if their low effort attempts get just as much airtime or more? I mean, Jack Harlow is an example of someone who tried to give people what they supposedly wanted, and he has gone on to prove that what people say they want and what they actually consume are completely two different things. And I truly believe that this is all rooted in the 2016 era of music, where there was a slight decrease in quality in exchange for entertainment value. However, this slight decrease in substance has continued to steadily decline over the past few years and leads us to a situation where we find ourselves now, reminiscing over how good music was years ago. 2016 was a good year for music, but it's overhyped, and not because of the music that was released, but because it was the starting point for a rapid decline in hip-hop creation and gave way to commercialization over artistic expression, and we just let it happen. What do you think of the current state of hip-hop compared to 2016? Am I completely off the mark? Let me know in the comments.